Welcome to the Leadership Collective podcast, the show where we delve into strategies, insights, and tools that empower leaders and organizations to excel. I'm Jenny Mead, your host for today's conversation. With a background in leading HR, people and culture across various organizations, I now serve as an executive coach, board advisor, and fractional chief people officer, assisting leaders and their teams in navigating growth, change, and complexities of scaling business. This episode is part of our special series From Startup to Scale Up, where we examine the pivotal steps founders, CEOs, and leadership teams must undertake as they expand their organizations. In previous episodes, we've explored topics ranging from securing funding to building scalable teams. Today, we're focusing on the journey from minimal viable product, MVP, to successful scaling. I'm excited to welcome Mark Sears to our discussion, who I've had the pleasure of working with before. Mark is the founder of Cloud Factory, where he led the company to become a leader in the AI data labeling space, growing a global team of over 7,000 in around 15 years. Recently, he transitioned to the role of executive chairman and launched Sprout AI Studio, a venture studio dedicated to partnering with visionary founders to build AI solutions that amplify genuine relationships and promote human flourishing in the digital age. In this episode, we'll explore the critical stages of startups' evolution, from validating an idea to achieving product market fit, and the challenges of scaling while maintaining quality and team alignment. Whether you're a founder, a leader in a growing business, or simply interested in the realities of transforming an idea into a thriving organization, this conversation is definitely for you. So welcome, Mark, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Jenny. I'm very much looking forward to the topic and the conversation.
That's great. Well, this is going to be a great conversation. I've been looking forward to this for a few weeks now. So let's start with our very first question. So when a founder has an idea, for example, let's take a tech startup, one of the biggest challenges is validating whether there is a real problem to solve. What's the best way to approach this at the early stage? Because I'm sure there's lots of people with many ideas. And what do you think they should do to avoid making mistakes? What mistakes have you seen that people do when it comes to validation?
Well, this is a great place to start because it's certainly where I'm spending a lot of my days and my energy trying to figure out. So with a venture studio model now, this is the secret sauce, is figuring out how do you make sure you have a validated problem, a validated solution, and and you're ready to actually start building. And I think that it's pretty common with first-time founders that there is no process. It is all gut feeling, and I'm definitely guilty of that, right? Where it's just very typical. You have an idea and you just kind of start building and just literally winding your way, hopefully, towards something. But honestly, when we always hear these crazy stats of 80% failure or 90% failure of startups, a lot of it has to do with this. It's the fact that we tend as entrepreneurs to just jump in and try and build from a gut perspective. And don't get me wrong, gut is really important because it can't be a perfect science trying to figure out if there is a true venture opportunity or not. But I think what I've learned is that actually there's a lot more science than I knew and than most people tend to take the time to do. And so I think the way I think a lot about it is you can kind of go through the pain early on of trying to validate an idea, or you can end up bearing a huge amount more pain later on. And so sometimes the analogy of if you're trying to build a prototype, sketching it on paper and just really looking at like putting wireframes, putting them in front of people, like that's really, really quick. And the cost of change is just like literally scrubbing up the paper and going to the next. Versus if you actually start building that software to try and show people and get them, that now takes a lot more time, therefore money and energy. And so the biggest concept here is just fast experimentation. How do you run the quickest, cheapest experiments to validate, is this desirable? Is there actually people who want this solution or not? Is it feasible? Is there the ability to actually make it? Because typically, what also has happened, we've actually had a venture that failed this test a few months ago, where we thought it was a great idea, had a lot of market validation of interest from the potential segment we were targeting, but then we went into technical feasibility and we just found out it wasn't possible to actually do it yet. Like the technology was just not mature enough that was required for it to actually get to market. Or is the last one, is it viable? Is that we could have done it, but we would have had to spend a lot more money in the bill of materials. It was an AI wearable for kids, and it just would have been way too expensive. That would have again made it not desirable. And so, kind of the intersection of desirable, viable, and feasible, and running quick experiments as fast and as cheap as you possibly can. And the more work that can be done on that front end to really feel confident that both the problem and the solution you have are validated. Again, I think as I've done it a couple times. I didn't do that. And then what happens is you get really far into it and you're having to make what we call pivots that are sometimes unnecessary because you didn't do the hard work up front. So yes, a topic I'm very passionate about. It's more important than ever, and it's easier to do than ever with a lot of the amazing tools. And again, I apologize in advance if I say AI 100 times during our conversation.
That's okay. Everyone needs to be on that. That's a word that needs to be on everyone's lips at the moment. I think that's a really helpful process, what you were talking about in terms of, how to go through that thinking and approach that. And then you kind of what you're saying in terms of idea to validation and going through those steps is really useful. But you also then were talking about that rapid experiments and almost like going into that rapid prototyping and then iteration. So it might be that somebody's kind of got that validation to a point that they're ready to spend some time, a little bit more time and go for it. But then how quickly then can you kind of go through that rapid prototyping and while still solving that problem that you've written down on that piece of paper? How can founders balance the need for that speed, but also making sure that that validation that you've done is continuing to be done and you're still getting that feedback on that product?
Yeah, no, that's good. And reminds me, I don't think I answered part of your last question because I think what are some of the mistakes that I've made and friends have made? It would be really mixing up that discovery, validation, and then kind of MVP building, right? So it's like, okay, great, we've got a great idea. Let's go and do some discovery. Let's talk to people. Let's do some research. You got experts, and you're really just trying to understand the problem space more and kind of get ideas around what your solution can be. And then the validation is actually, again, running through saying, okay, is it desirable? Is it viable? Is it feasible? And then you're actually starting to build a minimum viable product. And so the biggest mistake that I make is you just start to blur those together. And so you kind of start building your MVP so that you can do validation, but really you're not doing validation. You're not validating it. You're still trying to discover and understand it. And so those things kind of all get mashed up together. And obviously reality is that there's going to be a lot of overlap. It's not going to be perfectly clean. But so I would say that is one of the biggest mistakes is just jumping too far ahead in the process and mixing them up. Now, that said, the analogy I gave of a paper prototype actually isn't really valid anymore because of this rapid prototyping and iteration ability with AI. It continues to change definitely on a monthly, but potentially on a weekly basis. It really is just such a moment in time. I mean, we literally have almost $1 trillion that big tech has spent to create this unbelievable tool for companies today to start building solutions. It's like a kid in a candy shop with the tools that we have available, and specifically, really, really quick prototyping is just literally as simple as speaking. So I hit a button on my computer and I just start speaking into prototyping tools like V0 from Vercel, and others that are out there that allow you to use AI agents to begin, like, just literally speaking into existence what your idea is. And so you can skip so many more steps than you used to be able to do it. It used to be, you've got an idea, you'll do a pencil, paper, and then or whiteboard, and then you will maybe move into like Figma and start making wireframes, and then you get a front end developer, and you work through this whole chain of people and process. And now this rapid iteration and prototyping is truly rapid. I mean, it's literally gone from being weeks to days to hours. And so the value of that in kind of today, literally today, 2025, being able to figure out how to do discovery, to do validation, and then beginning to build an MVP, those iterations are so quick and they're so different than they used to be. It's more than just a technology change. As you know better than anyone, there's people change, there's organizational change, because the game of product development has changed overnight.
And I like that. It's 2025. It's January 2025. Because anyone listening in March 2025, it could be changed again.
It will be. Yeah.
And I think actually, just hearing you speak at the start of that, I'm sure there are going to be many listeners who are falling into that trap of blurring the lines. But it is a good reminder to actually just take stick your head up a moment and just think, what am I actually trying to do here? And is this actually at the right stage of where I need to be in terms of idea to validation and then rapid prototyping and iteration, which then kind of leads me on to my next question, which is, that first product market fit. So once somebody's got their funding to start building its first MVP, how can founders sort of really tell they've hit that product market fit? And do you think there are any specific signs that people should look for, or even warning signs that they're not quite there yet? So what's your experience of that?
Yeah, it's actually a hotly debated topic. I think people fall kind of on two sides. It's like it's more, you can feel it or you can measure it, right? And so I think that there's a bit of both, but a lot of people will be on one side or the other. Again, kind of the art and science of product market fit. So hotly debated topic. Most of my experience has been on the feel it side. Like we really talked about, these are the qualitative ways as a small team that we're going to feel product market fit, right? It's like, we're going to wake up and it's just like, we're going to be spinning up servers. We're going to be like, there's like a way that you just describe almost literally the people on your team, how their day to day is going to change when you hit it. Because yeah, I do find, like, so the measurement side, people will typically go to something like a net promoter score, or, the most common would be like a 40% rule, which actually I really like, because it's kind of a mixture of measurement and qualitative, where you actually say, so all of your early users, you just ask a very simple question saying, hey, if this product went away tomorrow and you couldn't use it, would you be all right? Would you be disappointed, or would you be very disappointed? So it's almost like the opposite of a net promoter score. But what you're looking for is at least 40% of the people who are using your early MVP say, I would be very disappointed. And so that means that they have actually brought it into their company and or individual workflow. Like, it's something they rely on. They now depend on it. They began to make changes around what you have brought into existence in the world. And that's like the best sign that you are onto something. It's like, no, people are already relying on what we've built. And they'd be very disappointed if we took it away. So I kind of like that one, mixed with a little bit of some other signs, right? Because the challenge with kind of going back to even the validation is whenever you're relying on what people say, it's like, that's hard, because what we say and what we do, there's just a gap, human nature. And so people say, oh, this is an amazing idea, I would absolutely buy that. But then you ask them, okay, good, well, here's a button, could you just pay $1 and do it? And like, I'm not paying $1. That's right. So similarly, what people say that they'd be very disappointed, and then the next week they stop using it. So I think kind of all the way through the stages we've talked about, just recognizing and remembering that there's a gap between what people say and what people do. And so you often have to make sure that you're really looking at the do things, right? It's like, okay, let's not just ask people questions. Let's actually put up opportunities for them to do something. And that behavior actually is going to be probably a more stronger signal to us that we've got a validated problem, a validated solution, and now we actually have a validated product for a specific market.
I like that actually. I like the way that you've said it. Actually, if you do reverse, it's almost like reverse psychology, isn't it? In terms of actually give them, that they'd be extremely disappointed. And the behavior bit, I think is great because, and I've fallen foul of this in terms of I've been asked as a client for a technology actually, how do I like it? And I've ticked absolutely great, but then I haven't logged into it for however long. And so they're looking at the behaviors and I think, wow, I'm a big fan of the product, but am I actually using it? So,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I think that's a,
Engagement, revenue, right? So there's just some good old classic like, is your revenue growing? What are your engagement usage metrics? And are you getting a lot of user feedback? So again, similarly, if people really would be disappointed and are becoming reliant on this, they're going to be asking for changes and features because it's only a minimal volume. There's no way you can have everything figured out of the gate. And so you're going to be getting a lot of requests. So people are saying, hey, I've got an idea, fix this, do this, I want this, plus the engagement metrics, plus revenue, plus again, just kind of the feel of your team's day to day starting to change. I think it's a mixture of some of those qualitative and quantitative and like the feel and the measurement together, and honestly, I think the other side of it is if you're unsure, you don't have it because I think obviously typical is, we think we have it. But I have had it before, only a couple times to be honest. And so you just know it's obvious when you have it.
and that's a really good point, actually. I know this is another question now, but to your point around people getting excited about the product coming in, like clients coming in and suggesting features and changes and things, and then suddenly you're trying to manage that and in line with the roadmap that you already might have, but then there's all these others that are coming in. I'm just kind of wondering how tricky is that to manage, and have you, could you end up actually trying to build a product about what around one client's expectations as opposed to around actually that product market fit, the market that you're actually trying to go after? Is that a
Yeah.
balance?
Yeah, I think that's so. Again, very common mistake at this stage is that we tend as entrepreneurs to think, okay, we want to make our product, desirable by the largest addressable market possible. So therefore, we need to start adding features, right? So I mean, again, it's kind of cliche, but we do make that mistake. We always will say with our lips, less is more, and we know that we have to stay focused and keep things simple. But it's so easy just to have that scope feature creep, and you just start building more. And I think that the most common challenge there is we begin to lose track of actually who is our target user, and we start trying to make it too many different segments that you're building a solution for. And so you kind of start off saying it's going to be this, and then you start scaling almost too early because you're trying to grow revenue, you're under pressure. I mean, all these things that are going on in the context of building a startup. But it very quickly, of course, makes it so that you now have something that doesn't solve it for anyone. And so, I don't think the other side of it of just building for one makes sense, but actually, if you can literally just keep it down to a really small number. So if you know exactly who your segment is and you have even, two is risky, but three, four, I mean, it depends again if this is B2B or B2C, but if you have a small group of people literally that you can name, right? So you could have 20 kind of businesses that are using your MVP at this point. And so maybe it's just three of them that you are literally building for on a day-to-day basis. Doesn't mean you ignore the other 17, but you really are doing almost co-development with those three. Or if it's a small group of users as individuals, that's one way to really stay focused on that segment and don't fall into the typical scope creep.
That's a really good suggestion. So I'm going to move us on to actually thinking about the moment where, I mean, some of the series that we've been doing has been focused on how do you prepare for the going to get investors and go and do all of that and get your funding. Now I kind of want to talk to you about, okay, there's a moment where you've, as a founder, you've gone through that process, you've done all your investor presentations. Great, you've now got the funding. The money is now secure. It comes in and it hits you. Suddenly you've gone from preparing for all these investor presentations and trying to get people to join your purpose and everything to, oh my gosh, I've now got the money in my bank. What now? So I think there's a moment where that must happen. I'm kind of interested to see whether there is a moment when that happens. And then what's the best way for founders to handle that moment and then decide on what to focus on first? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm going to take a chance, but I feel like we can, Jenny, because I'm Canadian, so I'm living in the U.S., right? So I'm a little bit, I'll consider I'm an arm's length distance here. I'm going to talk politics for a second because that's always a safe topic, right? But I think the thing that I've come to realize is there's a little bit of a parallel of, you know, you run a certain campaign to get elected, and that is very different than kind of day one in the office, what it actually looks like. And I think similarly, raising capital, it takes time. We always want to think it's like 3 months. It's never less than 6. So as founders, that's like the common every time, right? It's like, oh, we've got momentum, we've got product market fit, we've got traction. So, this is going to take some of my time for the next 3 months, and then it's always at least 6 months. 6 months, as we just talked about, in the life of a startup is massive. And so when you start putting together a plan, you build you build your model, you build your pitch deck and the plan for your use of funds, and then you kind of keep to that, right? Because you don't want to be changing a lot as you talk to different investors, and so you make changes as you learn a little bit along the way, but you don't want to massively be changing your model and all of these things that you're campaigning on. And then once you actually get into office and you have the round close, it really is very different. It's like, okay, the money's in the bank, so we need to go. And it's always an oh crap moment, because you have been totally in this mindset of just trying to raise capital, and then all of a sudden it's done. The money's in the bank, and it's like, oh crap, now we actually have to go do everything we just promised we were going to do, right? Again, kind of the parallel to every politician. It's like, I only have 4 years to do everything I just said, and there's no way you're going to be able to do it. But let's do our best. So I think the idea there is the plan changes. 6 months, it completely changes, and you have no idea actually what is needed to happen 6 months in advance. Like, it's just at this early stage, it's so hard. So you really, like, the plan's changed. And then you have this, oh crap, the rubber hit the road. Now I'm like, the clock is ticking now, right? Where there's this expectation of continued up and to the right growth. And so it is a moment for sure that happens after every round of capital. And the only way that I know is literally just grabbing whoever is leading with you, locking yourselves up to a room, and then rebuilding the plan from scratch. It's as simple as that, because your plan is outdated, is irrelevant, and now it's like you're actually in the game. So yeah, I think I I don't know if there's a more intricate answer, but I think sometimes just acknowledging the relationship between raising capital and then actually doing that, like if you can just almost give yourself permission, be like, you know what, it's all right. Like it's not that it wasn't that we were lying or that we were wrong. It's just kind of how some of that goes. Now, obviously, there should be alignment and consistency at, the core level, but to then go ahead and do exactly what you had in your model and what you said from 6 months ago, that's just not even in best interest of your investors or anyone else, right? So again, it has to be open dialogue with everyone. You're not trying to do it behind closed doors, but giving yourself permission to just say, you know what, I've kind of had my head down fundraising, and I need to take a look, and we just need to come up with a new plan. And so hopefully you raise enough capital for at least 18 months, kind of a runway, and you can just sit down and then kind of think through, okay, what we need. We have so much gas in the tank. We need to get to this point. So generally, what does that look like? Literally from now to the next capital injection, and or hopefully even better than another capital injection would be getting to free cash flow and beginning to push off money. But and then also recognizing that we're just going to need to break that down. So it's like, let's figure out what to do for the next 18 months at a high level. And then let's just figure out what we need to do this quarter. And then let's just figure out what we need to do this month.
And I like the way you brought in your team. Actually, the way you mentioned it, said bring the people in that you're leading with,
Yeah.
because I think, and I coach founders as well when they're kind of in this, their Series A, Series B space, and the common mistake is thinking they can do it on their own, and they're trying to do it on their own, and they're trying to control, and whether that be because they don't necessarily trust in the capabilities, or whether they're just naturally, their tendencies are that's just who they are.
I don't think it's either, actually, Jenny.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting. Go on, you tell me.
I think it's the very common thing. Everyone talks about like founders very lonely. I think it really is. It's this insecurity that, if we don't have like everyone's looking for us, like our investors are counting on us to have the answers, and our team is counting on us to have the answer. And so you kind of get caught in the middle, and it's these oh crap moments of, okay, now the money's in the bank and we need to do everything we just promised we're going to do, and you don't have the answers. And so it really is this, it's the inside soft side, I think, where you're just like, I don't have the answers and I need to find it out because everyone's counting on me. And so I think, like you said, it's that, again, it's also giving permission to say, you know what, I don't have the answers, but I'm confident that we can figure them out together.
So that idea of that team is just a brilliant reminder. That's great. Thank you, Mark. Thinking about the team, thinking about resources, and I'm going to talk about resources generally now, so it could be multiple, but no matter how much funding a startup gets, it never seems to feel like enough, potentially. I don't know whether you've ever experienced that. And then you're thinking about how you spend it and approach the prioritizing of that spending and making the most of those early resources. What sort of things do you think, what sort of advice would you give somebody who's in that stage, thinking about how they manage limited resources to be the most successful in this particular phase of the company?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good statement, right? Is the idea of, even though it again sounded like a large amount of money, when you actually get there to the point of, okay, money's in the bank and now we need to start figuring out how to invest and allocate it, it's never enough. It's never enough, even when it's many millions or tens of millions of dollars. I haven't experienced hundreds of millions at a time. So maybe that's enough, but probably not, right? I mean, even literally right now, like the billions and billions of dollars that big tech AI companies are raising, I'm sure that they are just realizing this is not enough. Like it's constraint, which feels crazy, but I think it's a good, I think there's always parallels to our personal lives too, right? With money. I think there's this idea of like, you keep thinking like, oh, well, one day when when I have more money and making more money, then, it'll look like this and I'll have more money to do this and do that. And it really is surprising how that often isn't the case in some sense. And what I mean by that, right, is coming back to a startup is you get funded and you keep thinking that like things will change, and they do to some degree. Like the big joke that I've had with someone we both know well, right, that was working with us, Cloud Factory, was very early on. It was we had to always share hotel rooms. And so he was like, and like that's kind of all right when you're in your 20s, but like after a while, and so that was like a really big motivation, was like, you know what, we're just going to close this round of funding so we can get like separate hotel rooms. And sometimes like I laugh, but as ridiculous, like those can be really good tactical motivations for things, right? Like it's hilarious. Like it really should be much bigger picture of why you're trying to close money. But sometimes, but then the reality is you kind of get there and you're like, you know what? We still don't have enough money. So maybe we can get it like a little bit better, but we're going to New York City. We can't afford to. So I think I think it's just good to remember again the idea there is just minimizing non-essential spend. As much as we keep thinking, as you grow, as you get more traction, as you're able to attract resource, it's actually really long build till you get to a place where you can act like a regular enterprise that just kind of has employees that just do expenses and they don't really think about these things. And but that startup stage, it is minimizing non-essential spend so you can invest it into product. I mean, it's as really as simple as, until you have product market fit, it has to go into product. And then once you have product market fit, now you have an expense of actual go to market. And now we are trying to figure out, okay, what are the different channels to test? And that's one of the real big challenges that you kind of have at this stage that we've kind of progressed to is, okay, we've got product market fit. Now we'd like to develop a channel strategy to market. We'd like to go direct to market. We'd like to go after, small and medium size and enterprise. And like you realize like you can do one thing, like you're going to be able to go after one segment with one channel. And that's kind of the constraint on the go to market side after you have that product market fit, is everything has to be staged because you just don't have enough resource to do a lot. And so minimizing the non-essential spend so that pre-product market fit it's going into product, and post-product market fit it's going into figuring out distribution. Those are it's just remembering those basics. Like it's you don't have enough to do what a mature enterprise company is able to do. You just do not, and falling into the trap of thinking you do will just steal resource from either that essential product market fit search or figuring out your go to market search, because those are the sequences. Because you can have great product market fit, but now you need to be able to find a low cost way of acquiring and retaining clients. And that's really hard work too. Like those are the two major things that you need. Well, I would go, the first one is that validated product, validated idea or problem and solution. And then you have a product for a specific market. You've hit that fit. And now you have to go ahead and figure out, okay, how do we get it to that market in the most efficient way possible so that we can actually scale it? And so it's really that 1, 2, 3. And then you get to the point, right? At this stage, you're probably post Series C, and hopefully, then you're being able to, then you can start thinking a little bit more holistic. But until then, you're not in orbit, and you're just having to focus all of your money, all of your team on those sequences.
And it's managing the expectations of the team as well. In terms of if they know you're going for funding and then you have a celebration to say you've got the funding, it's not then just a breathing space, is it? It's like, no, we've really got to do something with this, and managing expectations. Because I can see people would see it slightly differently, potentially. You talked about efficiency and whilst you're scaling and things. And actually, when a startup starts to scale, to gain that, to keep that efficiency going, it could potentially mean that you lose sight of the quality that kind of comes because you're trying to do it efficiently. So the quality that got them there in the first place. So how can founders manage growth while making sure they don't compromise the product or the service, particularly as you're adding heads in and your team is getting bigger? Because, new people coming in and things like that. There's things to be thinking about there, but maintaining quality must be right up there, even if you want to do it in the most efficient way. What are your thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, no, I definitely am passionate about this topic as well. And again, I'll probably, maybe a bit of a theme here is, I think having founders and CEOs, just the ability to give permission to say, you know what, you can't. And so sometimes it's just, again, like it simply is a lie that you can maintain, because what you're able to do as a very small, tight-knit, efficient team, as you begin to scale and you get organizational complexity, and like you're hiring people that are 2 and 3 degrees away, and all of these things start to happen. You lose proximity, all of these. To think that you're going to be able to provide that same level of quality, I think, yeah, it's just probably not realistic. Now, the only way to counterbalance that, like, I really think it's a teeter-totter, is like you have the realities and the complexities of beginning to scale and grow. And that's growth, certainly from like a team and employees perspective, also just from a customer base, as we talked about. Now you have a wider customer base that are asking for more things, and they have slightly different needs. And so that complexity just goes really, really wide quickly. But the thing that you do have now is we kind of went through the sequence of focusing on, validating, and then on product market fit, and then on figuring out your go-to-market distribution. Now you're able to start thinking about those regular things like, okay, how do we actually build some systems and some processes? And how do you start thinking about automation? How do you start thinking about maturing some of the things that you've been doing very brute force and inefficiently? And so I think that's the counterbalance at this stage, is you're able to begin to, and that's where, you came in like very precisely when we worked together, and we're able to bring that to that stage of saying, okay, great, you guys have a really good culture, you clearly care about your people, but there's some like basic building blocks here that can bring some efficiency and some bones and structure to, what you guys are doing and how you do it around here. And so, yeah, I think that that's the reality, is like, what, it's just not going to be the same when the complexities of more people and more customers are around your business. But then that's the opportunity to start bringing in systems, process, automation, and just maturity. And hopefully you can do that at a rate, right, that can keep that overall quality, and of course measuring that through net promoter score and other sorts of ways to just keep that tracking becomes the most important thing kind of at that stage.
And you mentioned culture, and I think it is easier to do when you are intentional about culture. And we have another episode that we talk a bit more about that as you scale, about how you maintain that, because it is one of the most difficult things to do, I think, as a founder, because the feel is you when you are much smaller, but as you build your leadership team, your management team, the subcultures happen, and if quality isn't in that subculture, then that will impact it. So how do you get that? And there's an intentional way in which I think people need to think about that. So, but as I say, we cover that in another episode. But it's exciting to hear talking about actually when you get to a point where you can bring in people that are, a luxury in many scenarios. But so we're talking about that scaling now, and almost then that second product market fit that needs to happen. So we've been quite specific about the first product market fit. So finding product market fit for the first time, as we've heard, you've got to be you've got to go through quite a rigorous process. But scaling often then means that you need to validate your solution again. in new markets, and certainly quite quickly, if you know from our earlier conversations, in particular markets and with new products. So what is different, or is there a difference, I guess, in finding the second market, the product market fit, and how should founders and their leadership teams now approach that?
Yeah, it's just it really is this crazy thing as a founder because you're like, we just went through war after war to get to where we are and saw people dropping, along the way. So it's like we did all that. We found product market fit. We figured out some distribution, and we've seen great scale and growth, and we've been able to maintain, quality through maturing. All so you've done all of that, and your reward is you get to do it all over again. And so I think part of it, honestly, is again a little bit embarrassed to say this, but I don't think the more that I talk to other founders I think it really is it's literally a surprise. Like, oh, I need to do it again. Like we don't know that we need to do a second product market fit, and the problem is that, a lot of founders, like if you have worked in a large enterprise, sometimes you can't be the person that actually builds something out of nothing, right? And so you haven't seen it, and so you don't actually know what is your target. Like what does it mean to get into orbit? And the idea is you cannot be a one-trick pony. Like you literally can't just have one thing, one product for one market, even if that scales really well. At some point, you're going to need to diversify, and you actually have to have a product portfolio, and then you need to have business units, and like there's just this whole maturing and growth side of it, and then there's also the other side of there's just a natural S curve to every product and solution, right, where it begins to taper off, and you need to make sure that you're timing your investment into innovation so that your next one kind of continues as that tapers off to hit its next on ramp, and so a lot of that comes down to, first of all, just really recognizing that you need to do that, like a second product market fit is required. The next one would be finding the timing, but then the trickiest one, of course, is actually how do you now innovate, because you're now the incumbent, you're now you're starting to become the bigger boring company that you was the enemy as a startup to get to that point. And you think, it's like me and, well into my 40s thinking I'm going to go out and just do something with my 15-year-old son like I was 15, and the next thing you know, like you tear a muscle or something, right? And so how do you really build innovation at the point of going through all of the other stuff to get that second product market fit? I would say most companies are not set up for how to do that. How much are we allocating of our money towards the current business, right? That's actually, hopefully it's a cash cow. Hopefully it's putting off cash, right? But how do you continue to invest into that engine? Well, now you need to build a whole new engine, and finding the right way to set up the organization, finding the right way to allocate the appropriate amount of capital, like all of those sorts of things. A lot of people don't get that right, and they don't get the second product market fit. And then you have organizational stuff that comes in, you have investors, right? Because you got to remember at this point, right, we went through this whole process. Remember those investors that we brought on really early who believed in what we're doing? We had the oh crap moment of what to do, right? Those people have end of life on their fund, right? They usually have a 10 plus 1 plus 1 or 10 plus 2. And so you start getting to the point now where they're getting late and they have to start giving returns, not just marking up like that the company's growing, but they actually have to give cash back to their limited partners. And so then you start having like changeover in your investors and ownership, which changes your board, changes your management, all these sorts of things. And so, yeah, that stage of it's just this unbelievable stage, right? And I think you hear in some of the energies, like, I just wish I knew more about like how this plays out, because I just, as many founders, you're just thinking about the next thing, the next milestone. And you have to do that. But wow, if you can have people around you that can see a little bit bigger picture of like 2 or 3 steps ahead, it can help you to actually do much better in that certain stage. And so I think
Mm.
that, I mean, that would go back to why I'm really excited about the studio model that we're doing, right? Because we have, a group of people who have been through some of these wars and have a lot of energy to keep building, but we want to do it alongside of, founders who we can help to kind of just look a little bit more into the horizon of like the sequence of battles that are here, and hopefully that can de-risk and speed things up and just have more really important solutions come into the world. Like, how do we address the major issues of our time by coming around and supporting and partnering great entrepreneurs that have like big hearts to do something meaningful in the world, but also they have the brains and the brawn and the energy to actually get it done, the competency.
And the experience as well. And, other than the things that you've kind of mentioned, there's other things that kind of get thrown at a company, the economy. For
Yeah,
us, Mark, we went through
yeah.
COVID.
COVID,
And
yeah.
I remember when that first happened and we were like, what's going to happen in the quarter? And things get thrown at you. And I think in a way, you need to actually be able to have that risk management plan. But I really do like the idea that you and Kerry and Carson have kind of pulled together in terms of actually you've got this studio and people are able to work with you and get that knowledge and experience that kind of you never had that when you went through it for the first time. So I think it's great. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of move on to our final question now, and it kind of goes back to people. I know you're a big fan of people. You're really intentional about the culture that you and your value set is really there. And I think that with growth brings challenges, and I've already mentioned the subcultures that you kind of can get, but also within that as well is keeping the team aligned with the company's mission as well as the values. That gets harder and harder as the business scales, particularly if you're scaling cross sort of countries and you're going global with that. What have you found works best for keeping everyone on the same page during that growth phase when you're bringing people in?
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, I think everything we've talked about only works when you're able to maintain that clear mission and purpose and values all the way through as you're fighting all the other battles we talked about. It's like probably the real battle is exactly this. It's how do you actually keep everyone aligned and on the same page? Because, yeah, I don't know. Many battles are lost because of not because of like competitors in the market, right? But it's literally just you yourselves are not able to stay unified and together and focused in it. And so, yeah, definitely no silver bullet, of course, in this. There's not one thing. I think the whole idea is it needs to be just a multi-pronged, very intentional, very prioritized effort. But it starts with clarity of purpose. And that's something that is a ongoing, like, peel the layers of the onion just to keep getting more, like you kind of have an idea and you kind of have some language, but it's just like, okay, really, let's go deeper, let's go deeper, let's go deeper. Like, what we need to really understand, why does this particular organization exist? Like, what is its purpose? Like, what are we here for compared to anyone else? And then, like you said, it's like, and what are our values? Like, how do we do things around here? And how may that be different than, any other organization? And I think if you can really just put the hard work into, it's almost like navel gazing, which can be bad, but it's just sitting there and just you're having to just carve out time to do that in the midst of fighting all the battles we just talked about. You have to also just keep figuring out more and more clarity. What is our purpose? Who are we? How do we do things? Um, and then and what our strategy is, and so kind of having that purpose and the values and the strategy, and being able to very clearly communicate that, and recognizing that some people, that might need to be like a long form narrative, that might need to be a visual, that might need to be some, like, everyone has different learning styles, and so finding there's different ways to communicate something that's very clear. And I think one thing that we found, right, the typical kind of change management, right, is you find a core group of people. It doesn't mean it's even your leadership, right? Like, it could be all through the company, but you find a group of people who really get it and really just like bleed like the DNA of those things, the purpose, the strategy, the culture, and and then really just empower them even from where they are. It doesn't mean that you have to promote them, but you find different ways to really just help them. Sometimes it's even having people change departments or even going to different offices, right? So we would have people go from the Nepal office to the Kenya office to the UK office. And so you kind of do some cross pollination of those, those champions who really get it. And that can be, again, geographically, or it can be cross culturally, or whatever way you can do that. Is you're trying to take those culture ambassadors and just enable them to continue to help others. If that's new people coming in, onboarding, or just different people who are going through, or teams who are going through hard times, and might kind of, things start to get foggy and they start thinking, oh, I don't really know why we're doing this, or if this is really important, or if am I really adding value? And so you can take turns. That's going to happen. You can take turns, but if you've got people who can kind of prop each other up, be that, again, individuals or teams and departments, that's, yeah, again, I think it's just a combination of those different things, of just getting the clarity, putting into multiple different ways, hitting it 100 different times, right? Even though you feel like you've said it like too many times, it's like, now you just say it double that. And then you take the people who get it and you really help to kind of cross pollinate and equip them to just continue to help new people and those people who may kind of begin to lose the clarity of why you're doing what you're doing. So yeah, I don't
I
know.
think that's great. I think
I
that's great.
tried.
And I know, I think that's great. And I also like the idea of when you said it doesn't need to be your leadership team.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good reminder that actually there are people that get it, they want to join. A lot of people that I career coach now, one of the very first things they say is, I need to connect with a purpose where I'm looking for a job.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you've got people that really do connect, then that's fantastic. And I think it's a great example of how you can then work with them. And recognize them for doing that. As you say, it doesn't need to be through promotion. It just needs to show that you value them, and actually they play a part in making that company tick in the right way. So I love that. Thank you, Mark. Well,
Yeah.
that wraps up today's conversation. Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing your thoughts and expertise. Really appreciated you coming along today and really guiding startups through, giving your valuable advice on how we can look through the critical stages of validation, product market fit, first product market fit, second product market fit. I think that was great. And scaling successfully, all while staying true to the mission and values as we've spoken about. So thank you so much, Mark, for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you. These are fun, hard topics that we're all going to just keep learning on. So yeah, it's helpful for me as well, just as I'm back building, to just continue to keep thinking and learning about all of it. So thank you.
That's good. Thank you. Well, thank you. If you found this discussion valuable and want to continue growing as a leader, I encourage you to explore the Leadership Collective. They're committed to equipping leaders with tools and insights needed to navigate today's complex business environment. To learn more about their work and how to get involved, visit theleadershipcollective.global. Thank you for tuning in to the Leadership Collective podcast. I'm Jenny Mead, and we'll see you next time. Until then, keep pushing boundaries, driving meaningful change, and leading with vision and purpose. See you next time.